And we live. Give me 1 second and I'm gonna get started. Give me about 5 minutes, y'all. Let me get started. I'll be sending links out real quick. Peace, Lord. Finesse. Give me a few minutes and I'm gonna get started. See a few people jumping in now. Give me a few minutes and I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna just go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. Let me see what all in the chat. Peace, brother Judy, Bob, Mark.
He called for the unity and the redemption of the African world. Salute them, honorable Mardi Gras. We were not ready to listen then. They might not have been ready then. There's wonder whether we are ready. Ain't no doubt about it. To listen. We ready, baby. Now. Let's go. Yeah. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Black kiss to the sky, breaking side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. All these G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. Hold it high. Let it fly. Rebel colors forever. Mommy would never die. On the 90, the throne ready. Let's take a ride. Cash, walk, big, men don't choose a side. This is the path for the warriors. Some travel yet still vainglorious. Black power represents us. You either rolling with Africa or against us. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Black kiss to the sky, breaking side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. All these G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. The red is for the blood. I got the best stock. The rest got blood. The black is for the gods, melanated and elevated, holding the main charge. The green is for the cradle. Africa, everything first, the earth stable. This excellency, put it together as a symbol of liberation. That's how we get the letters RBG. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. Black kiss to the sky, breaking side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. All these G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. This fly high is 99. People army of no time. I was draft on my design. We won't ready. Hard line, ain't no game for that red flame. Trip stage of that black bang. Revolution in my veins. If we free, I won't change. And you can count on that like an advocate. Celebrate the victories and the challenges. It's deeper than social media, the statuses. This lifestyle, elevation, building practices. Yeah. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. Black kiss to the sky, breaking side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. RBGs worldwide. Doing this thing garbage style. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. My flag fly high, my flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high, my flag fly high, my flag fly high. RBGs on the rise. All eyes gonna recognize. My flag fly high. It's so familiar. It's so familiar.
All right. First, I want to say ETM Hotel. Dua Duau. Dua Aku. Dua Necha. Fatmu Alafie. Fatmu Iwa Pele. Madupe Ibe. Egungun Majube Iba E. Egungun Kiki. Egungun. Appreciate everyone for tuning in to the show. Let's jump into it. Today's presentation is called the Louisiana Uprising of 1811. All right, before I jump into it, we have to give our war chant out because we are at war with our culture. We are at war with our heritage. Let's go to war. For everybody that's been following my presentation, this is my slogan. As I learn, we all learn. I believe it. We continue to expand our mind, continue to learn things. I think if we share information, pass information down to our families, to our communities, to our societies, I think this is the way we'll be able to excel. We continue to pass information down. So as I learn, we all learn. I had to put out a disclaimer before I get started. My disclaimer is I am not a teacher, but merely a student sharing information. And that information provided is for the educational purpose only. And if you are in doubt, do the research or have it verified by someone qualified. I reserve the right to change the focus of this presentation or shut down, sell, or exchange the terms or use at my own discretion. All trademarks, design rights, copyrights, registered names, mottos, logos, avatars, sigmas, marks used or cited by this website or the property of their prospective owners. I reserve the right to add information as it comes available and adapt changes, improve information as it comes available in the future. Inputs wanted, changes, additions, deletions are encouraged. All right. Here's a historical account. The French colonized the Louisiana. And first, before I get started, I'm going to kind of walk y'all through. Again, the name of this presentation is called the Louisiana Uprising of 1811. So I'm basically going to give y'all backdrop of historical information about Louisiana, a little bit about Louisiana, and walk our way all the way up into the revolt and the march into um, New Orleans and what expired this revolt and how Haiti is tied to the revolt that happened here in Louisiana. Peace, peace, brother Michael Phillips. Historical account. The French colonized Louisiana the French colonization of Louisiana became a great extent at the Piano colonization. During 1717 and 1718, the sentence of prisoners who had been condemned to a galley were commuted, and these prisoners were sent to Louisiana to work for 3 years. Africans in the colonial Louisiana, the development of the Afro-Creole culture in the 18th century. Thus, the French settled were unstable. In contrast, a major factory of British settlements along the eastern seaboards were a group of tightly organized religious deserts. In 1789, San Domingo, now Haiti, exported 70,000 tons of sugar yearly. After 10 years of war and revolution in 1801, San Domingo exported only 9,000 tons of sugar. In 1802, Louisiana had 70 sugar plantations, producing over 3,000 tons of sugar. The demise of the sugar production in San Domingo corresponded with its rise in Louisiana. The New Orleans area saw an influx of San Domingo sugar planters, slaves, and free people of color in the first decade of the 19th century due to the social turmoils that produced in Haiti in 1804. So a lot of um, the sugar plantations that was over there in what we call Haiti or the Democratic Republican, now San Domingo, the effect of the Haiti Revolutionary War that started in 1791 and ended in 1804. And that war, that continuous years of wars, had an effect on the sugarcane uh, economics over there. So you start to see a lot of things start to transition over here in America and in Louisiana with the French, because you know the Haitians went to war with the French at that particular time. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Haitian Revolution and how Haitian Revolution ties in with this uprise of this revolt in 1881 in Louisiana. Some of the planters left Saint Domingo earlier in the decades and went to Cuba. Then the Spanish colony later in the decade expelled the Spanish government that came to New Orleans. In short, of the system that produced the San Domingo Revolution was now transplanted in Louisiana. I'm gonna say that again. In short, the system that produced in San Domingo Revolution was now transplanted in Louisiana. And not only the system, but the memories of the revolution. Upper rivers from the New Orleans to Germany coast was thinly populated with plantations on both sides of the Mississippi River. By 1810, slaves constituted more than 75% of the total population and close to 90% of the household owned slaves. In the production cycle of the sugarcane, January was the opportunity time of the year in many ways. By Christmas, the cane had already been harvested and processed in the sugar mills. January and February was a time of plowing the fields and planting the cane seeds. For the slaveholder, these 2 months were also a time of a grand dinner social that leads to the Mardi Gras. So now I'm leading up. I wanted to touch real quick about the Haiti Revolution, how the Haiti Revolution caused a decline on the economics in Haiti due to the warring with the sugarcane. So they started transplanting and the French started transplanting the sugarcane plantations over here to Louisiana, because at this particular time, Louisiana also, the French also owned Louisiana at this time. So during this yearly, this long drawn out war with the with the Haitians, they took their sugar cane plantations and brought them over here to the United States to Louisiana. So now I'm finna talk, and we're gonna get back some more into the Haiti's revolution. But now we're gonna talk about uh what led this plot or this plan. Who led these group of men to march to revolt and to try to march into New Orleans to do certain things, which we'll talk about what the march was all aspired by, and we're gonna continue to talk about this mastermind or this plot that led up to this revolt. Perfect timing and organizing for them to actually go through with this revolt. In the production cycle, the sugarcane, January was an opportunity time of the year in many ways. And by Christmas, the cane had already been harvest processed in sugar mills. January and February was a time of plowing in the fields and planting the cane seeds. For the slaveholders, these 2 months was also a time for a grand dinner and social that led to the Mardi Gras. And for those that might not know about the Mardi Gras, we're going to talk about the Mardi Gras. The Mardi Gras is very popular in New Orleans. It is also very popular in Alabama. We talk about the Mardi Gras in New Orleans a lot, but we don't talk about the Mardi Gras in Alabama. But the Mardi Gras was everywhere. It just wasn't in the United States. It was worldwide. The slaves were allowed to celebrate the seasons. In the French tradition, slaves from all over were allowed to gather in the area that became known as the Congo Square. And I have talked about the Congo Square in recent times in a couple of my presentations. This was the only time where the slaves was able on Sunday to have the day off where they can actually go and gather in the field. And I talked about this in my drum presentation, that drums in this particular times and dancing was illegal. So the only place where it wasn't illegal was in New Orleans. And this is where our ancestors would gather after the slave master would give them the day off. They would gather in the Congo Square where they would trade amongst each other, where they would play the drums, because this was the only place where it was legal to play the drums, dance, fellowship, and other things birthed out of that. The Mardi Gras, blues, jazz, some other things that birthed from out of the Congo Square in New Orleans. Today, part of Louisiana, Armstrong Park, on most Sundays. In addition, the slaves brought produce from their small plots on the plantation to barter and exchange at the nearby markets in what we today call the French Quarters. Peace, peace, peace. I am King Sosa. Peace. The governor of the territory of Orleans, William C. Claiborne, fell surrounded by a Spanish empire. So in the fall of 1810, with the backing from the U.S. President James Madison, a plot was hatched to start a settler revolt against the Spanish Empire. And as you look at a lot of the Mossi presentations, you will see we always showing you how these Europeans was always warring against each other, especially when they started establishing these different colonies when they came to North America, what we call the United States. And British, they was already growing with each other. So now you got in the United States, after the United States declared their independence. So now you got the United States is trying to stake its claim in another colonized area of Spain. Settlers against the Spanish Empire, out of which came the brief Republic of West Florida, subsequently annexed by the U.S. government in December of 1810. In January of 1811, word spread that the Spanish government was sending troops to take West Florida back, thereby causing the garrisons of New Orleans to move eastward. And this was just something that they was trying to do to take what they at this particular time only lasted for about a year, what they call the Republic of the West Florida, which a lot of people may not know that Baton Rouge, and we're going to talk about Baton Rouge because Baton Rouge is also a part of Louisiana, that Baton Rouge was once a part of Florida. Yes, Baton Rouge, Louisiana was once a part of Florida. It was called the Republic of the West Florida at this particular time. So the United States was trying to war against Spain to take that area from Spain. Now, what was it? Regarding to the largest slave uprising in history of the U.S., the 1811 Germany coast uprising was a slave revolt that took place in parts of Orleans on January. We don't talk about this revolt a lot of this at this particular revolt, some other revolts that happened over here in North America, but at this particular 11, this was the biggest revolt uh, ever, and planned and I mean executed and planned just right. And we're gonna get more into that. And we're going to talk about the march, because we always talk about the Million Man March, but no one talks about this march here. So we're going to talk about this march before we even get to the Million Man March. But also to continue to talk about how Haiti how Haiti is tied into this revolt here in North America in 1811. Where did it take place? The revolt took place on the east coast of the Mississippi River and what are now St. John the Baptist and St. Charles Parish of Louisiana. The Germany coast, French Cadiz Amis, was a region of early Louisiana settlement located in New Orleans on the Mississippi River, specifically from the east-west in St. Charles, St. John's the Baptist, and St. John Parish of the present-day Acadian. History of the areas, it named derives from a large population, and this uh, Germany coast, or what they call in Louisiana, the Germany coast, or the Germany coast uprise. I call it the Louisiana uprise. This was a particular place where the Germans occupied this region. You had the French that actually owned this area, but they had some Germans in a certain section. And I think I touched about how these Germans ended up in this certain section that they call the Germany coast, that's in Louisiana, settled held by the Rhine regions of Germany. The German-speaking cantons of Switzerland and other places today called the Bayou, Das Alamis, and Lac des Allemands. Gradually, the Germans intermarried with the Acadians and their descendants, and beginning speaking French together with other settlers. They helped create the Cajun culture. Who was involved? One of the leaders was Charles Deslondes, Deslondes, if I'm saying his name right, a slave from Haiti. So we talked about earlier, I talked about how the Haiti War actually affected or disrupted the economic system, the sugarcane economic system in Haiti. Between them warring, the Haitians revolting against the French, and went to war with them in 1791 and up until they got their independence in 1804. So this warring that took place was a downfall on their economics. So the French had to take their sugarcane plantations and they inserted it in Louisiana, a particular region that they colonized and they had. So they took their sugarcane plantations and planted it in New Orleans. And now you're starting to see this leader, Charles Desley, who was also a slave, after they started to implant the sugarcane, they started bringing people also from San Domingo or Haiti or Dominican Republic over here to Louisiana. And Charles Deslondes was one of the individuals who came over here. So remember this individual name. How many people was killed? There was 2 whites that was only killed, but there was 66 slaves that were killed in the battle, 16 executed, 17 escaped or died, which there were actually more than that actually died. But there was 2 whites, and there was actually more slaves that actually died in the battle, that we're going to talk about the battle, and a little bit more was executed. And we're going to talk about some of the court cases dealing with the execution, how, you know, the 17 or the few that escaped, who actually escaped but then got captured and then got tried in another region. But we'll talk about that. All right, Charles Deslondes. I'm gonna say Charles Deslondes. Hopefully, I'm saying the name right. Charles Deslondes was was one of the slave leaders of the 1811 Germany Coast Uprising, a slave revolt that began on January 8, 1811, in the territory of Orleans or New Orleans. He led more than 200 rebels against the plantations along the Mississippi River toward New Orleans. But you have some accounts say that it was arranged from 200 to 500 uh, people that he actually um, rallied together when they took the march on to New Orleans after the revolt on this plantation that I'm going to talk about. Uh, he led more than 200 rebels against the plantation along the Mississippi River toward New Orleans. White planters formed militias and ended up hunting down the rebels. The slave insurgent killed 2 white men and militants and killed 95 slaves. Born into slavery in San Domingo, now Haiti, Deslondes was described in some accounts as a mulatto or a mixed race. He was brought to the Louisiana territory by his masters after the Haiti Revolution. And this and some people I talked about in my Gory Island presentation, we talked about the mulattoes. I know a lot of people hate to use that word mulatto, the word mulatto, but a lot of people was kind of a little upset about the word mulatto, or a lot of people was a little upset about how I talked about these certain mulatto women that actually started running Gory Island, and I actually had slaves and married these European men to get this status, and then took Gory Island over at a particular time. Now you see here with this particular mulatto, some accounts say he was a mulatto. So you can see here this brother who was Haitian, of Haitian descent, was brought here from Haiti. He actually did something. He actually did something in the beginning that you may not like, but I think it was all to strategize the plan, or he did something. We'll just get into it. We'll get into it. But you're not gonna like what he did in the beginning. He has brought to Louisiana territory by his masters after the Haitian Revolution. After the Haitian Revolution, when thousands of French Creoles brought their slaves and mixed race refugees also left the islands. They began to start to plant uh their sugar plantations in Louisiana because of the constantly warring after year with the Haitians from 1719 to 1804. They started to bring their sugar plantations over here and started to bring some of their um, their workers over here as well to work on the plantations over here. So that's how he ended up over here. He left after the He left after the Haitian Revolution. After, uh, where I'm at, of 9,059 immigrants in 1809, about 30% were white and 35.6% were slaves. The remaining were free people of color. And we're going to talk about the free people of color because I keep trying to reiterate. If you look and continues to look, peace, 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 brother Jadar, peace. Thank you for joining, brother. Thank you for joining. So, uh, a lot of you look at a lot of my presentations, I always try to demonstrate too, even though we had a plethora of our ancestors were slaves, we had a plethora of our ancestors that was also free at a particular time. I talked about Nova Scotian, which is New Scottish in Canada. So our ancestors was free. Our ancestors was free in London after the Revolutionary War, when our ancestors escaped the plantations and started fighting with the British. They was free in London. I talked about our ancestors free in Florida. The Spanish made St. Augusta or Fort Moss, which is in Florida, made it a free town. And then at a particular time, I'm gonna talk about the free people of color here, who was also free when the Spain took over. When Spain, we know French and Spain and French had Louisiana or had New Orleans at one particular time. So we're going to talk about the exchange in the hands of those two and how people at a particular time in Louisiana was also free, what they call free people of color. And Deslondes was also was actually one account saying he was free, but I'm gonna talk about that was a mix-up or error on a newspaper that actually documented that he was not a slave, but he was a free person of color. But actually, he was a slave that was brought here, and he was not a free person of color. But we're gonna talk about the free people of color and what they role they had also in this uprising in Louisiana. So Deslondes worked as a driver, a overseer of slaves. So when he was brought here from Haiti, he was actually a overseer. He was over the plantation, so he was a slave driver, a or overseer of slaves on the plantation. Called Emmanuel Andry's of or Andry. This plantation was later called Woodland and no longer exists. He was on the Andry's plantation, who had a total of 86 slaves, and later printed in Philadelphia political and commercial advertising on February the 19th. That year, Deslondes was mistakenly described as a free person of color. And this was in the Philadelphia political and commercial advertiser, and this was in February the 19th. And this was where he was mistakenly described as a free person of color, which we know he was a slave and brung over here from Haiti. All right. Questions now. Why did slaves choose January 1811? January 1811 as the day to revolt. There are three supposed to be. There are three reasons. Excuse me for uh the what's the name. But here are the reasons. First reason, I told you, it was he strategized this. He did certain things. We know a slave driver did a lot of different things. He beat the slaves, chastised the slaves. He did all type of, slave driver did all types of things to the slaves. And at this time, by him being over that Andry plantation, he was able to roam freely. And as Charles Deslondes was able to roam freely, he was able to go to other different plantations. So he was able to plant different seeds into some of the other slaves that was on the plantations. So he strategized strategically to set a particular date for the revolt. This will be a perfect date. So I'm giving you three of the reasons why he picked January 1811 to actually start this. And again, I'll go back why I showed you here in the production of the cycle of sugarcane. January was an opportunity time of the year in many ways. By Christmas, the cane had already been harvested and processed by sugar mill. January and February was a time for plowing fields and planting cane seeds. For the slaveholder, these 2 months were also a time of grand dinner and a socialist that leads to the Mardi Gras. So a lot of people that has attended the Mardi Gras and know the Mardi Gras, I have been to the Mardi Gras on many occasions. I hadn't been in a few years, but I've been many occasions. So we know this is a festivity that lasts for 2 weeks or a week and a half. This Mardi Gras, they have been doing this since time immemorial. So this was also a particular time, which we're going to go back into the reason. So the first reason was the start of the carnival that built up to the Mardi Gras. The slaves choose this ideal time because the lavish planter balls, and celebration going on throughout this period. The planters would have huge parties, turtle gumbo, and massive amount of mines and brandies. The morning after one of the parties was ideal time to launch a revolt because they will all be tired. They'll all be hungover from partying. You know what I'm saying? From eating merry, you know what I'm saying? And drinking brandy and so forth. So this carnival that they did certain things that led up to the Mardi Gras. So this was one reason. The second reason was William Claiborne, the governor, sent military forces to Baton Rouge to fight Spain. So I showed you on another slide talking about William Claiborne and him wanting to take over Baton Rouge from the Spaniards. And Baton Rouge at this particular time was called the Republican of West Florida. For those that may not know, that Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was a part of Florida at this particular time. it only lasted for the Republican of West Florida only lasted for a year. But Baton Rouge was a part of Florida at one particular time and not Louisiana. So they went to war. So the United States went to war with Spain, fighting over this territory. So this was another reason. So the American military was embroiled in war with the Spanish. The bulk of the military was in Baton Rouge, and on the 68 troops are left in New Orleans at this particular time. So this was another reason. The third reason, on January the 4th, a rainstorm blows in which was important. Due to this storm, they couldn't transport artillery. So slaves with an axe, musket, and had better chances at another set of military forces with the muskets, as well as that then do the military forces with artillery. So they also strike because during that time of this big storm coming in, they couldn't haul in they couldn't transport in any major artillery at this particular time. So they knew that they had a better chance of fighting the rest of the troops that may have been in New Orleans at this a particular time to fight against them. They would have a better chance with them with less military on, because half of the troops was already in Baton Rouge fighting fighting for that territory from Spain at that particular time. So these were the three reasons uh um that they choose that date in January to actually set the revolt into place. So it was strategized strategically. Like I said, he was an overseer, a slave driver, so he was able to roam freely across what they call the Germany coast, where these Germans that actually came at this particular time that was in New Orleans and in this area up the coast, excuse me, of Louisiana. So he was able to go in and talk and strategize with other people and start to set things in motion. 200, 207 years ago this month, the elite in New Orleans were making their usual preparation for the Mardi Gras. Planters owners were planning all night parties, and the women of the houses were looking forward to elaborate masquerades and balls. And like again, for those that know about um, Mardi Gras, we know the Mardi Gras deal with balls, they deal with masquerades, they deal with parades, um, they deal with a whole lot of stuff in time, a lot of entertainment, a lot of entertainment. Why they didn't know it? Why they didn't know it was while they were planning for their annual carnival festivities. The slaves were planning a little something of their own. The Mardi Gras, just giving people a background of what the Mardi Gras, those that may not know what the Mardi Gras is. The Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, is a final day of the carnival season, which begins on a feast of the Ifan. Just a historical backdrop of the Mardi Gras. January the 6th, carnivals and roots are various. Let's pay that word. I hate that word. Pagan celebrations of offspring, some dating back 5,000 years. But it was the Pope Gregory who made it a Christian holiday when in 1582 he put it on the Gregorian calendar, placed it on a day before Lent begins. Much of the first part of the carnival season, and again, I'm giving you this because this was one of the strategic plans that plots that he did, was he knew this was one of the first reasons that I gave you a while ago, was he knew this would be the best time, because a lot of these times this Mardi Gras would last a week and a half to 2 weeks, and he knew that they would be partying, putting on masquerade balls, putting on these different feasts where they was eating, and they was going to be doing a lot of drinking. So this would be a great opportunity when the Mardi Gras start to jump off, or the carnival jump off, ending up into the Mardi Gras. This would be a great time to attack the and revolt. So much of the first part of the Cavana season was made in invitation only balls and supper dances hosted by private clubs known as the crews. The public portion of the carnivals came to life in a couple of weeks before the Mardi Gras, when the crews hit the streets, staggering more than 70 parades metropolitan New Orleans. And we know that's what the Mardi Gras are famous for, is a lot of their parades also. Mardi in French word for Tuesday. Mardi means Tuesday in French. Gras means fat. So Fat Tuesday. So a lot of us, I know I didn't participate in Mardi Gras the whole week, the week and a half, 2 weeks. I will always go on Fat Tuesday. Oh, Fat Tuesday. And that's what a lot of people still do today. We all gang up and we'll go to New Orleans on Fat Tuesday. But we always talk about New Orleans, but Alabama has a Mardi Gras as well. Alabama, I think it's Mobile, Alabama. I think it's Mobile, Alabama, Mobile. I mean Mobile, Alabama. I think is the one that has. I had never been in that one. In France, the day before Ash Wednesday came to be known as Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday. Traditional in the days leading up to Lent, merry makers would binge on a rich fatty foods, meat, egg, milk, lard, cheese, and remains of their homes. The anticipation of the several weeks of eating along fish and different types of fasting. The word carnivals, another common name for a pre-Lenti festes, also derived from the feasting traditions of the Midville Latin. Cornel varius means to take away or remove meat, from the Latin cornine, from meat. All right. One night in January the 8th, a rain continued to come down. Water coursed along the wood roofs of the slave quarters, drowning the staccato voices with streaming, rushing noises. 25 dark faces looked on as slave drivers turned the rebel Charles Deslondes, and these on the Andry plantation. This was the plantation that Charles Deslondes was a slave driver or a overseer over this Haitian brother who was brought over here to Louisiana, and again at this particular time, after the Haitian Revolution took after the Haitian Revolution. But we know a lot of the French started to bring a lot of their plantations down what they call the Germany coast in Louisiana, in those different parishes, because they was losing money because the Haitians was because of the war. And also we're going to talk about how the Haitians expired this revolt, but the Haitians was also the Haitians for Spain. Well, the French selling uh, um, New Orleans or Louisiana to the United States was caused by the Haitians. The Haitians made the French lose a lot of money because they war from 1791 to 1804. So they took a a great deficit, you know what I'm saying, in their economics because of this warring. This is the reason why they French had to bring a lot of their plantations to Louisiana and bring a lot of their slaves to work on the plantations in Louisiana from Haiti or San Domingo or the Dominican Republic because of the Haitians that led up to the plan that gave final words of encouragement. Every man assembled knew peace to brother Damo, peace sister Lisa. Uh, Laid off a plan and gave some final words of encouragement. Every man assembled knew that his presence meant a near certain death sentence if the revolt failed. No slave revolts in Louisiana had ever before been successful, and the punishment of the failed rebellion was clear: torture, decapitation, and one head upon the pike. Yet, with a plan of distracted by the carnivals and the American military fighting the Spanish Baton Rouge again. One of the reasons was the Mardi Gras were finna jump off, and the second reason was they was warring in United States was warring against Spain, trying to take Baton Rouge away from Spain. And the third reason was it was a storm that took place where they wasn't able to transport artillery into New Orleans at this particular day. So they knew that they would have a better chance against the little military that was there. They had a better chance to fight against them up against the revolt once they revolted on the plantation, and then the plan succeeded and the march took place into New Orleans. At the overseer of the right hand man, the plantation owner Manuel Aldrich, Charles Deslondes held and trusted a position. Hold on, let me go back. Make sure I didn't skip. All right. I want to make sure I get everything. Okay. The final words for encouragement. 25 dark faces looked on it as the driver turned rebel Charles Deslondes laid out a plan and gave a final word of encouragement. Every man assembled knew that his presence meant a near certain death sentence if the revolt failed. No slaves revolt in Louisiana had ever before been successful, and punished for the failed rebellion was clear. Torture, decapitation, one heads upon the pike, yet the planters distracted the carnivals and American military fighting against the Spanish past Baton Rouge. The slaves believed that just might have a chance. As the overseer and the right-hand man of the plantation owner, Manuel Andry, Charles Deslondes, held in trust position that afforded him a great deal of freedom. He was able to travel from plantation to plantation and communicate with other slaves, as I was talking about, leading them known to what was going on and what was happening. Cook and Quamandi, which as a was, you could say, was both of his right hand man, or his left hand man and his right hand man, probably from the Akan, a warlike African empire, were soldiers who had been trained for battling since birth, intelligence, and skill. They were affordable. There was a affordable trio. So Charles Dessalines was the leader, and he had these other two brothers who they said was probably from the Akan tribe in Ghana. As the slaves made their final preparation, their planter masters, Manuel Andrys and his son Gilbert, laid asleep in their beds in their respective chambers, surrounded by family portraits and fine furniture from Europe, lured to the sleep by the pitter patter of rain. Perhaps now, dreams of the month of dance and parties ahead, they felt secure in the world they had created. Both leaders of the colonial military, the two were respected men in the community, but to the slaves, they were known only for their cruelty, for frequently whipping the left deep scars in the back of several of newly minted rebels, and their iron collars they wore fast around the slave's neck. With the clouds darkening the cane field and the rain blotted out the noise and approaching, the slaves hastily towards the back door of Andry mansion. Catching each other eye glinting in the night, they held their cane knives and machetes with with the tight fits. Even in the darkness, Manuel Andry plantation casted a formidable shadow, a high roof soaring into the sky, shitting and bizarring and broadly gathering from the rain. With the charge leading away, the slaves entered a brick wall storage passage and made their way toward the wooden double staircase that led upstairs to the quarters of Manuel and Gilbert Andry slept. As the slaves stowed onto the second floor landing, Manuel Andry woke to the sight of a dark form penetrating his bedroom. As his eyes snapped open and his brain awoke with a fright, Andry caught a glimpse of Charles Deslondes, a new look on his face. Ordered his fellow slaves toward Andry with an axe. One can imagine Andry's reaction in a fog of panic and those first instance of awareness to seeing Charles, his most loyal driver, his reliable assistant was over a decade. The man, and he was on his plantation for a decade. The man who had trusted and managed his plantation. So Manuel Andry never seen this coming. He never thought that Charles Dessalines, his most trusted slave overseer, a slave driver from Haiti, would turn on him because he had been there for a decade. Now turned betraying and potential murder. His mind clouded by fear and anger, Andry's eyes fixed on Charles' acts in the plantation tools transmuted into the icon of violent insurrection. As the slaves surged toward him, Andry leaped from his bed, and the slave stood between him and the staircase. And the staircase was his only way of escape. Andry made a decision to act, charging toward the surprised slaves. As he rushed through the crowd of rebels, the slaves lunged at him, slicing his passing body with three long cuts. But somehow Andry made it past. He hurled himself toward a staircase, turning his head along to catch his most horrible sight: the slaves swinging their axes into his dying son's body. And I told you there were 66, which there were more than 66 slaves that was killed during this revolt. there was actually more than 18 people that was executed. And those people, those 16 people that escaped, those people was actually found and also executed in the court of New Orleans. And I told you it was two whites that were killed. The first white was Audrey, not Charles Audrey, but Manuel Audrey's son. But Manuel Audrey, the slave master, he actually escaped, but his son perished. Pursued by a pack of angry rebels, Audrey could not stop. He could not turn back. With a blocking curdle vision of his son's death emblazoned in his mind, his adrenaline took over. He ran far for his life. Hold on one second, y'all. Come on in, son. Come on in, son. Do a live stream. Ready, go? Sorry about that, y'all. I had to get the dough for my son. Put your stuff up. All right. He ran for his life. He sprinted through the clover field in front of his mansion toward the waters, where he knew the pagode laid on the leads. As the slaves had gibbered Audrey into pieces, Charles decided that it would be fruitless to send men chasing after Manuel. His ambitions were greater than killing one planter, even a planter he hated so personally. He saw liberation and conquest on a greater scale. He did not think Manuel Audrey would make it too far, and even if he did, a wounded middle-aged planter posed little threat to his slave army, or so Charles thought. In Charles' mind, the tides had finally turned. Baptized with a blood of his former master, Charles and his men broke into the stores in the basement of Audrey's mansion, taking muskets and military uniforms, stockpiling in case of domestic insurrection. So they broke into his basement and they took a lot of weaponry. They took a lot of the muskets. They ended up dressing themselves in military uniform before they actually took the march. They did the revolt on the plantation, on the Andry plantation, and now they finished go through. That was the first part of the plan. Now the second part of the plan was now to march into New Orleans, but as they marched into New Orleans was to go through these other different plantations down the coast to get the other guys that Charles Deslondes had recruited earlier with his plan. So they began to dress themselves up in a military uniform, stockpile in cases of domestic insurrection. Many of the slaves had learned to shoot muskets in African civil wars, while others were fought more effectively with the cane knives and axes that they had learned to wield in the hot Louisiana sun. As the men gathered weapons and showed ammunition into the bags, Charles and several of his fellow slaves cast off the distinct and cheap cotton slaves clothing and put on Andry's militant uniforms. Charles knew Charles knew that the uniforms would lead the revolt authority, welding their struggles with the imaginary of the Haitian Revolution, whose leader, and this brother comes from the Haitian Revolution. He comes from Haiti. He was brought over here after the Haitian Revolution. So he was there during the Haitian Revolution. So he was the leader. So the Haitian Revolution expired him once he got over here to set this revolt into motion. So that's how the Haitian Revolution is kind of tied through him and through the French actually bringing the slaves over here and bringing the slave plantations to Louisiana because they was losing money because they was continuous warring with the Haitian for years. So whose leaders had famous adopted European military guards. As they saw a rally other men to their causes, he must have hoped the uniforms would reassure the doubters of the legitimacy of their plan and their organization. If the revolt was to succeed, he would need numbers. Amid the rainstorm, Charles shouted order to his fellow slaves. They assembled in a clover field in front of Andry plantation, falling into line behind Charles, who was now mounted on a horseback. They were familiar with the military discipline. Their works of Andry's sugar plantation had taught them to follow orders of artillery. But now they were motivated now by fear of lashes, but the hope for freedom. They were 41 miles from the gates of New Orleans, which they hoped to conquer in 2 days' time. As later they had left Andry's plantation that night, the rebel Jupiter replied that they wanted to go to the city to kill whites. Now, this is a picture of just an illustrated picture of an artist who actually uh, painted a picture of Charles Deslondes. What they said he was mounted on a horse. This was after they revolted on the Andry plantation, and those 25 men that revolted with him was starting to go down the coast to start to get the other guys that Andry had already put in place because he had freedom to roam different plantations because he was a slave overseer that was brought here from Haiti. So as you can see with the pictures, they also had flags and drums and everything that we do, family. I tell you, we have drums. And I may go back and do a reloaded drums presentation, on the Mossi Facebook like page, maybe Monday. But the drums were there, the flags were there. So this was illustrated. Charles and his men began to march. Charles shouted, "On to New Orleans!" And the newly formed rebels' arms shouted it right back. The revolt had begun. Now this is the march into New Orleans. We always talk about this march that took place, and this march to Washington, the Million Man March. But this march is before you get to the Million Man March. This history was left out of the books. A lot of people rarely hear about the march to New Orleans. A lot of people rarely hear about the biggest slave revolt in 1811 that took place, that actually had Haiti had his how Haiti revolution actually expired, and it was actually, this revolt was led by a Haitian that was here in the United States. So this here is just a picture here illustrated of the march into New Orleans. So you have Deslondes, you have his two right-hand mans, Cook and Kwamani, if I'm pronouncing his name right, and those other people that other slaves that they started to pick up off the plantation as they started to go on these other plantations and revolt, burn them down, and get this other individuals that Charles Deslondes had already recruited and already had strategically set the plan up. When the Mardi Gras were going to go into place, he knew this would be a perfect opportunity to go in, because they was going to be partying, they was going to be drinking, they was going to be celebrating with their balls, their Mardi Gras balls. So they was going to be hung over, they was going to be tied. So he knew this would be a great plan. He also knew that during this storm coming in, they wouldn't be able to transport artillery into the place. So he knew this would be a great opportunity. So this is the march into New Orleans. So now when we start to talk about, when I get through the presentation, as we talk about, this march and we talk about this revolt, I hope more people start to talk about this revolt that was led by this Haitian, and talk about this march, or what this march stand for. It standing for the same thing, the Million Man March, which it precedes the Million Man March. So I hope that when we talk about the Million Man March, we can also talk about the March of 1811 into New Orleans, and talk about the uprising on the Andry plantation by Charles Deslondes. The slaves marched northly, according to the eyewitness, in military style formation. The beating drums, because I tell you that we have the drums in African culture. We have the drums in everything. The drums is the heartbeat of the community. The drums is a way of life for us. We have the drums and everything. When I mean everything, I mean everything. And a lot of people may be following me if they already looked at my African drums is a way of life and the heartbeat of the community. And again, I say I may go back and do a reloaded part of that presentation with a few slides and a few little information here in a couple of days on the Mossi Warrior Clan like on Mossi Arakunrin Facebook like page just to go over a few things with the drums. Um, Waving flags and carrying a variety of weapons, including firearms, which they got from out of the basement of Manuel Andry's, the plantation that the first plantation that they revolted on. All right, the slaves marched north according to the eyewitness in the military style formation, beating the drums, waving the flags, carrying a variety of weapons, including firearms. Slaves from other plantations joined by rebels who recruited on the fly, using forces of intimidation in some cases and swelling the ranks. The numbers of rebels, and they did that, the ones that wasn't on board, because you're going to see here, which we do, we have house niggas, we have people that love massa. You know what I'm saying? You know, we have them in our communities. We have them in our families. We have them on, if you got a job, you have them on your job, your employees. You know those that runs and go tell the white boss everything that you're back there doing. So we had this, no different. Same thing on the plantation. So they had to force some of the guys that didn't want to be in there in the beginning, force them, but you had some that went and told massa, and this what happened, and this is why the march stopped before it got to New Orleans. We'll get into that. But okay, rebels who recruited on the fly using force and intimidation in some cases to swell the ranks. The number of rebels fluctuated during the course of the insurrection. Eyewitness estimated a range from 150 to 500. And plundering several other estates, the slave tarried along enough in St. Charles Parish to dispatch San Francisco Tre Pinero, I told his name up, who had attempted to defend his family manor house standing on the veranda with a shotgun and lost his life. So this particular slave owner, as they continued to march to New Orleans, and as they began to get the guys Charles Deslondes recruited for some of the people that didn't want to join, this particular, you had a lot of going down that coast. A lot of those plantation masters, they ran for their dear life. But this particular guy here, he tried to stand his ground, and he ended up getting killed. So this was the second white person that got killed doing this. The first person was Manuel Andry's, who they revolted on the plantation, Charles Deslondes, slave master. Who did he revolted on first? They killed his son. They tried to kill Manuel as well, but Manuel was able to escape, but his son died. And this is the second white man that died. Here was John Francisco Tre Pagnero. I might have pronounced it right this time. Excuse me. Oh, my throat. Out of the fear, many slaves reported the uprise to their masters, and most, like I told you, we got them. You always running and tell master what's going on. That's why I tell you, some things you gotta keep quiet. Some things you can't even tell your own people, because your own people will get you killed. Out of fear, many slaves report the uprise to their masters, and most of these white splinters had time to go ahead toward the cities on horseback, hide in the swamps, or take boats to other sides of the river where they could still be safe. William C.C. Claiborne, which was the governor of New Orleans, the territorial governor, called out the militants, ordered a lockdown, and shot the carabiniers and imposing curfews. General Wade Hampton, commander of a regular troop station in the area to guard the territorial frontier, had arrived in New Orleans 2 days before the revolt. He took command of a hastily mustered force of regular troop militants and volunteers. He had to get volunteers. The general that had already came to visit Claiborne before the revolt took place, he had to get volunteers once the revolt took off and the governor found out about the revolt going down the coast and the march into New Orleans. So he had to set curfews and and evacuate the place. And General Reid was already there. So General Reid got the military that was already there. But remember, half of the military had left and went to Baton Rouge, because at this particular time, Baton Rouge again was called the Republican of West Florida. Baton Rouge was a part of Florida and not Louisiana at this particular time. And this was only for just a year time. But the United States wanted that territory from Spain. So now they went to war with them. So Claiborne had something to war, so with the permission of the president. So half of the people was already in Baton Rouge, so it was a little military that they had left. So he had to get volunteers. So that's why the volunteer is up there. He headed northward on January the 9th to confront a troop were mobilized to suppress the slave insurrection. Hoping to crush the rebels and the vice, Hampton dispatched orders from Major Homer, Virgil Milton in Baton Rouge to descend. Now he's calling the major in Baton Rouge because again, they get the troops in Baton Rouge. So now he's trying to get the major to rally up some more military to come back to help him with the military he had and the volunteers that took place. And we're going to talk about some of who were these other volunteers that actually took place in apprehending, executing, and capturing these rebels or these heroes. What I would like to call it. These guys was heroes. You know what I'm saying? So we'll talk about those volunteers in a minute. Hampton mobilized. Hampton mobilized, representing the first time in U.S. history that the federal troops was mobilized to suppress a slave insurrection. Hoping to crush the rebels and vice, Hampton dispatched an order from Major Homer, Virgil Milton in Baton Rouge to descend to the river and another body of regulars. Unknown to Milton and Hampton, Manuel Aldrich, remember Manuel Aldrich, his son died on his plantation, but Manuel Aldrich, the slave master, was able to escape. He just only had a few lacerations to the body by the machetes of the slaves. So he was able to escape. So now the General Hampton and even the major, they had no clue Manuel Aldrich escaped the plantation and what Manuel Aldrich was going to be up to. Now, despite of his wound, had managed to rally a sizable militant force on the west bank of river. So now you got three particular groups that are after Charles Deslondes, this Haitian slave from Haiti, and the slave driver on the Andry plantation, who actually revolted against his slave master, rallied up almost 500 people, took time to strategize strategically the plan on this particular day. For those that may have missed it, can go back and look at. I gave you the strategic plan, the three reasons why he did it, how it led up to this, how he ended up in New Orleans in the first place, this Haitian. So now you got three different, you got the volunteers from Louisiana with a small group of military that was left behind. Now you got the military that was in Baton Rouge fighting for the territory against Spain, against Baton Rouge, that's coming in. Major Homer has bringing back. And then you got Manuel Aldrich is has rallied up a sizable group of militia force. So now you got them being attacked three different ways by three different groups. The revolt climaxed on the morning of the second day, January the 10th. As these three forces converged for the kill, a unit of Hampton's forces under the command of Major John Darrington made first contact shortly after the rebels had crossed into New Orleans Parish. The main body of rebels had ensconced themselves at night on the sugarcane plantation owned by Jacques Frontier. About 18 miles from the city, Hampton planned to involve the rebels after dawn with a coordinated multi-pronged attack. Once on the offense, however, Hampton discovered to his astonishment that the reportedly drunk and disorderly rebels had abandoned Frontier's estate in the dead of the night with a disciplined retreat northward. Repositioning on the Bernardi sugar plantation in St. Charles Parish, the rebels were caught off guard by Andry's military after it had quietly crossed over from the Mississippi West Bank. Lines of charging mounted militant men, including free persons of color. I'm gonna go back and reread it. And family, if you like the information that I'm sharing, please like and share. Please like and share. We ask for you to like it if you like the information. If you don't like it, down it. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down. Either way, I appreciate it either way. If you're not liking it, thumbs down. You like the information, thumbs up. But the more you like the video, it's easier for people to find the video. That's why we ask to like it. But I'm not saying if you're not enjoying a presentation, if you don't like the information, like I said, I have no problem with you. Thumb the video down. But again, here, the Mississippi West Bank lines charging mounted the militant men, including free persons of color, broke the rebels' ranks, and the battle quickly turned into a rout. So you had free persons of color that actually helped the slave master. You had three different military forces. You had the force that was from General Hampton with the few that was left behind when the rest of the military was fighting in a war with Spain, trying to take the territory of Baton Rouge. And then Hampton called one of the majors to actually, hey, bring some of those troops back from Baton Rouge. We're going to need you. So now you got the troops from Baton Rouge, the troops from New Orleans that was General Hampton had got, and then you had another troop by the slave owner Andry, which was the first plantation that was attacked, the Andry plantation. So you had three groups, and then with those people, those volunteers that they was talking about that helped, that General Hampton got to help, they said with the military and volunteers was free persons of color. That's why I said sometimes we have to be careful who we tell. Even the people that look just like our own people will get us killed. And on another slide, I showed you how they had to force some of the slaves to actually join into the march, to revolt and go into New Orleans. You know what I'm saying? Because this Haitian guy had a determined, we will get into all of that, but the free person of color. And we're going to go back into this free person of color in just a second. The wounded Andrys, an eyewitness report of Governor Claiborne that it was an ungrandly carnage, a great slaughter. Free people of color. During the 18th century, Louisiana was a colony, first of France, 1718 to 1769, and the Spain, 1769 to 1803. Under Spanish rule, slaves acquired the rights to own the property and purchase their freedoms under the laws of coercion, whatever that is, allowing slaves to obtain a sum equal to their market value and a petition to the court for their freedom. The courteous offered slaves to slaves as a stake in society. They would use their free time to earn money by selling produce in the markets, acting as a nurse, artists, and hiring themselves out as laborers. Their owners was obligated to accept their self-purchase petition if the slaves were not disorderly. The purpose of this law found nowhere else in Angola or Franco America was to protect the institution of slavery by creating a middle group of blacks. By this end of the Spanish period, 1,490 blacks in New Orleans alone acquired their freedom by cashing payments, a remarkable achievement. And this is before 1865, before the Emancipation Proclamation was passed down, before the slaves was actually so-called freed in 1865. This was way before. We know that during a time when Spain owned Florida, we know Spain made it a safe haven for the slaves to actually come to Spain. Not come to Spain, but come to Florida or Spanish Florida. And if they made it and escaped the plantation, that they would be free. And long as they helped them fight against them, because the British were trying to take the territory of Spain, because the Europeans were just fighting over land amongst each other before they just actually got together for one common goal, and that was to continue to oppress us, take the land, and continue to build wealth for their family, continue to pass generational wealth down. So now in New Orleans, this was in Florida. Now in New Orleans, they come up with this law. This law where you was able to petition, and you was able to pay, or you was able to petition, long as you abided by the, I guess, the quote unquote slave rules. You was not disorderly, you was not causing a ruckus on the plantation. You was not trying to escape. You was not causing revolt. You was doing what you were told. You was working hard, so you was able through this law. You was able to get your freedom in New Orleans. So in New Orleans, you had 1,490 black people who they call people of free of free people of color. But as time begins to progress, it begins to get harder and harder before you either purchase your freedom in New Orleans or even through this law that they passed, able to petition yourself to be to petition yourself to be a free person of color later on time. So this is how was in New Orleans. So the Spain, wicked as they was, the Spaniards, wicked as it was, they did certain things, but it was for their own benefits. I mean, the thing with Florida was shit. The only reason why they allowed our ancestors to escape the plantations and go, if they escaped the plantation and went to Florida, it would be a safe haven for them. They would be freed. Then it was the only reason was long as they fought with them when it was time to go to war against British, because British had continued to attack Spain for Florida at this particular time. So, it probably was kind of the same reason we're here, because you had the United States trying to take Louisiana, from Spain at one particular time. They won over, just won over territory. So, but it began to get harder. But it was the free people of color. So in New Orleans, before the Emancipation Proclamation, way before, you had free people that was in New Orleans. And some of the free people of color helped the slave masters. They were some of the volunteers who helped the slave masters during Charles Deslondes' march into New Orleans. Following the Louisiana Purchase, the growing of free black population was argued by 3,000 French-speaking refugees from the Spanish Cuba in 1809, forcing out because of the hostility between mother countries. By 1810, the Louisiana Territory boasts 7,585 free persons of color, most of them living in New Orleans and representing 44% of the city free population. The territory also contained about 35,000 slaves and 35,000 whites. During the territorial period of 1803 to 1810, Louisiana ended the rights of self-purchase, excluding free blacks and participating in the new democratic institution. The Black Codes of 1806 stimulated that only slaves ages 30 and older who had demonstrated honesty conduct, i.e., not ran away or committed a criminal act, could be freed. And this was some of the stipulations. You had to be 30 years of age or older. You had to demonstrate honest conduct. You couldn't have to run away. Things that I just talked about. Committing criminal acts could not be freed. Which that's a hoop to me, criminal acts. After statehood in 1812, the age limit remained in effect by the laws was revised in 1827. When the assembled permission judge and the policy jury the parish to decide if younger resident slaves, those born in Louisiana, could be free. In 1830, a law required a manumit slaves who did not receive exemption to leave the states within 30 days, while owners were forced to post a $1,000 bond to ensure departure. The next year, this law was softened, but it was clear that acquired free status was becoming increasingly difficult, as I stated. In 1852, the assemblies required free slaves to immigrate to Liberia, resenting this when this was doing around the same time the American College Society, started the Freetown like Sierra Leone, which preceded it, where you start to have a lot of our ancestors start to migrate to West Africa. Rescinding this requirement in 1855 and turning the questions of individual manumism over to the district court jury. In 1857, the legislature prohibited emancipation altogether. So by 1857, you could no longer petition this law, the Cortesias, if I'm pronouncing it right, this law that Spain had passed, where you can actually purchase your freedom. You can actually petition yourself for freedom if you actually was abiding, had honest conduct. You was not a runaway, trying to run away, cause any type of revolt, or any type of fuse or anything on plantations. Slaveholders, judges assembled in St. John the Baptist Parish, St. Charles Parish, and New Orleans to try to capture the slaves. Sketchy records from two of the courts, St. Charles Parish and New Orleans, survive. The busiest tribunal comprising 5 elite slaveholders convened on the Deslondes plantation in St. Charles Parish. Outraged, rights removed from captivity, Charles Deslondes alleged ringleaders and proceeded to shoot, burn, and mutilate him. Proceeding, they at this time, hold on, let me make sure I didn't skip a slide. Okay, I talked about they draw down the war. A lot of people got killed during that battle. Let me go back. I wanted to make sure I didn't jump ahead of myself. All right. Uh, so after the battle, they was able to extend because remember you had three uh groups. You had the small group of military that was left in New Orleans. General Hampton argued them with the volunteers, who I told you who some of the volunteers was the free people of color. I explained how some of these people became free, and they were the only people free in New Orleans at this particular time, passed by this Cortez law by Spain. But in 1857, it became difficult, and there was no longer free people of color. But you had a lot of free people of color before 1865, and then you had the other major Milton or whatever his name was, that was actually had the military that was already in Baton Rouge fighting over the territory against Spain. He called and had that group to come in, and then you had Manuel Andry, the plantation master who escaped, but his son got killed. He assembled another group, so they was attacked by 3 different groups. They was countered, went to war. A lot of people died. Were Africans. A lot of our ancestors died during that war. A lot of people was captured, and a lot of people escaped. But we're gonna talk about what happened to the people who escaped. But the busiest tribune comprised of 5 elite slave owners. So during the time of them capturing the people, they comprised a tribunal. So they wanted to actually convict the Charles Dessalines and a lot of the slaves that revolted. So they revened on the Dessalines plantation, which also is in New Orleans on the St. Charles Parish. Outraged rights removed captivity Charles Deslondes. The alleged ringleader proceeded to shoot, burn, and mutilate him. So they shot him. They said they cut off his fingers, cut off his arms. You know what I'm saying? Shot him repeatedly and then burnt him. The presence in and around New Orleans of 1,000 of recent arrived white refugees from Haiti. Revolution intensified emotionally and framed a perception of insurrection. The deterred future slave rebellions, white gathers the heads from multiple blacks' corpus and placed them on top of poles and regular interview along the East Bank levees from the 30 miles from Andry's plantation to the gates of New Orleans. Here is an assertion of the sentence from the tribunal on hand. I talked about the tribunal. It was a tribunal that these slave owners, 5 slave owners, got together this tribunal to actually convict the Charles Dessalines and a lot of the people who revolted. So they hold trial at this other plantation in here. So here's an assert. The journey of the Louisiana Historical Association, autumn of 1977. The tribunal assembled on the 14th and called before the Negroes, which the revolt was 3 days, the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th. And they called for the tribunal to assemble on the 14th, a few days after they killed a lot of them during the battle, captured a lot of them also. Before its Negroes, John Thomas belonging to Menor Honor Hypolo belonging to Mr. Anidi tribe niggers. I think this was the brother that actually stand his ground, didn't escape like the other slave masters did when they started marching and burning down and recruiting the others and getting the other that was already recruited. He got killed. Cock belonging to Mr. James Brown, Eunice of Charles belonging to Lavish Brothers, Kwame, which was one of Charles Dessalines' right-hand man, and Romando belonging to Mr. James Brown, Initi belonging to Mr. Strax, Louisiana and Joseph belonging to Mr. Iti Trapagnier, the mulatto Guana belonging to Mercer, Kenny of Henderson, Acura belonging to Mr. Delhomini, Ned belonging to Mr. Strax, Amir belonging to Widow Shabana, Allow, of whom confessed and declared that they took a major part in the insurrection which burst upon a scene in the night of this month. The rebels testified against one another, charging one another with capital crimes, charging these people with capital crime because they want their freedom, their liberation, such as rebellions associated, arson, pillages, etc., upon which tribunals acting according with the authorities conferring upon it by law and acting upon desire and satisfying the wishes of the citizens, does condemned to death without qualifications. On the 18 individuals named above, this judgment of sustained today, the 15th of January, shall be executed as soon as possible by a detachment of militants, which shall take the condemned to a plantation of their owners, and their own condemned shall be shot to death. That tribunal decree the sentence of death shall be carried out without any procedure torture. In the future decree, the heads, the execution shall be cut off and placed on top of poles. On top of poles and on top of spots where all can see the punishment meant out to search crimes, also to terribly examine to allow who would disturb the public tranquility of any future. Don of the country of the German St. Charles Parish, Mr. Descherie's plantation. This is where they held the conviction or the court thing on another plantation, which was the Descherie's plantation, January the 15th, 1811, at 10 o'clock in the morning. Signed by Cabarets Descheron, which was held on his plantation, Edmond Frontier, Ottoman Frontier, A. Labonche, BP St. Martin's. These was the individuals. These was the people that was consisting of the tribunal on the plantation. Excuse me. All right, I talked about them executing them, what I'm saying, and placing their heads on poles. So you can see here a thing where they cut off a lot of the slaves who revolted heads and placed them on poles, and then they put them all down where they marched from the Andry plantation. And I'm gonna show you a little thing where how they the route that they marched to these different plantations along the coast and almost ended up in New Orleans, and why they was marching into New Orleans. But this is a little illustrated of them taking them and setting them on the head to set an example to actually cause fear in anybody else that wanted to try to set a revolt. This was what's going to happen. You was going to be, your heads were going to be cut off, and you basically was going to be mutilated. Here is just a picture of art installment by Whitney on the Whitney plantation, depicting the execution of Charles Deslondes and other captured slaves. So that's just a illustration right there. Heads on a poke, and then I think they have some of the names of the people that actually revolt. And I think this is Charles Deslondes. I think, I'm not sure. I never did blow the picture up to look at it. All right. Other slaves involved in the revolt escaped. So let's talk about the people who escaped. So we know that a lot of people died in war. They said between 66 and 100 some people that died. Then you had hundreds that was captured, and you had they said about 16, which there were more that actually escaped. So the ones that were captured, there was the ringleaders, far as Charles Dessalines, far as Kwamani, far as Cook, far as another brother, was a few other people. They was actually mutilated, cut off, especially Charles Dessalines. He was shot repeatedly. He was his arms, fingers were cut off, and decapitated, and he was burnt with fire. So the slaves that actually escaped, let's see what happened to them. Other slaves involved in the revolt escaped New Orleans Parish, where they were captured and tried. They eventually was captured and tried, jailed in the Cabildo of New Orleans. The slave case were headed in the city court. Now, this case was not on the plantation. The first one was on Descherine. Now, the ones that escaped was actually in the courthouse in New Orleans. The people and the ones that escaped that they actually caught. January the 15th through 18th, and again in the February the 2nd, as was the custom. They were tried by a tribunal consisting of judge or two justices of the peace and 3 to 5 white landowners or freeholders. Slave owners who served on the tribunal included Louis LeBlanc, J.B. Bloro, Daniel Clark Peters, Colassa, Stephanie Henderson, Chase Jomoville, Thomas Porral P., Dennis LaRonda, Jacques Revere, and J.B. Labatas. Examples of the case files from 1811 insurrection included Territory versus Negro, Jerry, slave of James Frontier City Court case number 85. Territory versus Negro, Attention, Neptune, slave of James Frontier City Court case 186, number 86. Territory versus Negro, John, a slave of Madam Christina City Court case number 87. Territory versus Garrett Daniels, the slave of Mr. Butler and Mr. Cutchin City Court case number 88. Criminal case file number 89. Territory of New Orleans versus Hector, the slave of I.E. Trask of 1811. Territory versus Jasmine, the slave of Neo Desireen City Court case number 91. Territory versus Theodore, the slave judges, Troy City Court case number 92. Territory versus Geary, the slaves of Mr. Andry City Court, which was the first slave revolt the Charles Deslondes revolted on and went down the court, case number 93. Territory versus City, the slaves of Israel E. Trask City Court case number 94. Territory versus Jacob, the slave of the late Mr. Milwaukee City Court case number 95. Territory versus Girl, the slave James Frontier City Court case 985. While the planners and political tried to write the rebels off of the mere act of savagery, they did not see that it was more a perfect storm. This attack was intelligent, as I've been saying throughout, sophisticated and highly strategic, which I said Charles Deslondes was a Haitian slave that came after the Haitian Revolution. I said that the French had to bring the sugar plantations to the Louisiana because they warred against the Haitians, revolted against them from 719 to 1804. So they took a tremendous loss in economics on the plantation due to them warring for all those years. So they had to supplant their plantations in Louisiana, and they began to migrate different slaves over. And then after the war, Charles Deslondes came to Louisiana, and he was a slave overseer or a slave driver for over a decade, for over 10 years on the Andry plantation, where he strategically strategized this particular day to strike and a revolt, and he thought this day would be successful, i.e. they was finna get ready to do the carnivals and the masquerade, which goes on between a week and a half to 2 weeks, where they was going to be doing these balls, celebrating, having these big cookouts, doing these big parades, and drinking a lot in these celebrations. So he knew they would be tired, hungover. So this would be a great time. Another time was he knew this storm was coming in. So the artillery wasn't going to be transported. So they would have a greater time. And it was another reason that it's escaping my mind at this time too. But I said it in the beginning of the slide. So if you missed it, just go back, rewind it, and check it out. I'm about done too. So many of them trained for birth hailing from African countries. The European greatly underestimated them. Claiborne stripped the rebellion of revolutionaries of geopolitical meanings of dismissing it is an act of base criminality. I say they was heroes. I say that they did the right thing. They was trying to liberate themselves. They was trying to form, which we'll get into what they were trying to do, because again, Charles Deslondes, he actually was inspired by the Haitian Revolution. So this of 1811, his strategic revolt was actually planned out and thought out and inspired by the Haitians. So he was there when they was actually fighting over there before he was over here. And again, like I said, the Haitian had a lot to do with the French actually losing a lot of money and then end up having to sell Louisiana. So Claiborne stripped the rebellions of the revolution of the geographical meaning of dismiss it as an act of base criminality, refusing to succeed to the slaves what from others' prospects and through other eyes might appear to be deeply political act. He chose to use the event as a way of portraying himself as a strong governor and the event emphasizing American power of civil struggle. He basically dismissed the whole thing and basically wrote it out of history. That's why you don't hear about this march. That's why you don't hear about this great revolution where this guy actually assembled over almost 500 people, how he strategically strategized this revolt. And the leader of this revolt actually was a Haitian who came here, who was the leader of this revolt. So I'm wrapping it up. Ramusas and other historians say that the revolt was inspired by, which it was by, the 1791 event in Haiti, where the enslaved population took over the island nation and abolished slavery. So this is what Charles Dessalines was trying to do. Charles Deslondes, I mean. These revolutionists had similar dreams as they marched to the beat of the drums under the waving banner toward New Orleans. The mission of Charles Dessalines, Cook, Commander, and the militants was very clear: to take over the city of New Orleans, free all the slaves, and establish a black republican. So they was trying to do the same thing that the Haitians did over there in Haiti, established a republican, free from up under the thumb of the European by going to war, revolting, and recruiting people and establishing a free black republican for them. So that's what Charles Dessalines was trying to do. Although they never reached the city line, the uprising was a monumental and imposing one of the great threats to the white supremacy and the age of slavery. And I say it probably would have took place and happened if you would have had a lot of the house Negroes that were actually on the plantation when the revolt jumped off and they started marching. You had house Negroes that started warning a lot of the slave masters. Then you had free people of color that actually volunteered and went to war with the slave masters that actually helped defeat, you know what I'm saying, this revolt. The largest slave revolts to ever occur in American history is entirely absent from our history books. However, the story of the patriots of the founding fathers are drilled into our brains at a young age, which it is when Patrick Henry stated, "Give me liberty or give me death." And we talked about Patrick Henry, ugly, wicked self. Me and Dr. Oyama Ott, when we was talking about the American Revolutionary War and what was taking place and what Charles Patrick Henry, who he was and what his role was, and the statement that we always talk about, give me liberty or give me death, because he wanted to be free from up on the British. So he said he gonna fight the British by all means. Give me liberty, give the United States liberty or give us death. So this was the same. So this kind of mindset was the same for Charles Dessalines in a reference to the Revolutionary War. American history wrote in as a hero, which he ain't my damn hero. Charles Dessalines sacrificed his life for the very same reason. He wanted the liberty. He wanted freedom for his people. And his name didn't even make the fine print. That's why they wrote him out of history, and the governor dismissed it altogether. So you very seldom hear about this march and this revolt by this Haitian leader Charles Dessalines. I ain't gonna read that. That was a little newspaper clipping. Here is just a little something of the route that they went from the plantation and La Plaza, which is a Paris and Saint John, which was Andry plantation. Here you can see the arrow where they went down, and Desirine plantation here. This is where they was brought back to and tried, but they went into here, they went here, and then back here, and then they went back into Desirine to be tried and convicted. Here, um, here is just a street named after Dessalines in Louisiana. The Holy Cross neighborhood of a lower Ninth Ward, New Orleans, former house of the jazz trumpet band leader Kid Chic Collars. Um, here, here is a historical mark here, Woodland Plantation. It was Andry's plantation, and it became Woodland Plantation later on in time. Acquired here in 1793 and 1809 by Manuel Andry, the commander of the General Coast Major. 1811 slave uprising organized here. I ain't gonna read it, but this is just a thing here. Here is the old plantation on the Andry plantation that Charles Dessalines was over. I just took a few pictures here of the plantation ground. There were more pictures. I just put these few pictures here. Uh, here. Here is the plantation that they have renovated. The Deslondes plantation. This is the plantation they was out. Those 5 slave tribunal masters got together and actually convicted hundreds of slaves uh, um, to be killed and be decapitated. So here's the plantation. Here, some of the grounds, some of the stuff in the inside here. Here are my references here. I hope y'all appreciate the presentation. I hope it was well informative. Again, I hope now when y'all mention the Million Man March, I hope y'all mention the 1811 March into New Orleans. I hope y'all mention Charles Dessalines when you're talking about a march. So I hope you mention this Haitian brother, Charles Dessalines, as well as Cook, as well as many, as well as over hundreds of slaves from that Louisiana era, from the German coast all the way down into New Orleans. But I'll keep it paused here for a second so you can look at my references again. I don't mind you scrutinizing my references. I don't mind you critiquing my work. It's the only thing that I feel like can make me better. I won't get in my feelings about it. Again, I hope this presentation was very informative. And like I said, please, when you mention a march, please mention Charles Dessalines. Please mention the 1811 march into to New Orleans. All right, here. Please subscribe to the channels, Seshuma Ani Meta Nature, which I am a group of like-minded individuals who are striving and continuing to learn the language, which is the Rani Kemet, and the writing script, which is called the Sesh Meta Nature. So please go and subscribe to our channel. We have a bunch of content where we're transliterating and translating the glyphs, the Sesh, the hieroglyphs of what most people know them by, as well as informing you about Kemet, or what y'all call Egypt history. Also, go subscribe to Kofi Piesie TV, which is my own personal channel. It is the channel that takes the black man, the black woman, and black child, Eurocentric mind, and Africanize it. So please go subscribe to that channel. Please support my channel. Don't just come on the channel. I look at the traffic. I'm getting a lot of traffic on the channel, but I'm not getting the subscribing, the back in traffic. So, but if you like the content, please subscribe to the channel. If you don't, that's cool too. But please subscribe to the channel. Again, it's the channel that takes the black man, the black woman, and black child, Eurocentric mind, and Africanize it. It is also the African Netflix. Whatever you want to know about our African heritage, about our African culture, is on there. Also, please subscribe to the Mossi Warrior Clan, which I am a member of. Y'all are on the channel now. So if you're looking now, or you're going to go, or those that may come later on and look at it in the archives, please subscribe. Don't just come on here and look at our videos. Please subscribe and support us. And be on the lookout. Tomorrow we'll be back at it again. Brother or Arakunrin, which means brother. My brother NERS Son Calfani will be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to present his presentation tomorrow on the Galili Festival. He's going to go in depth in that. That's going to be a powerful presentation. I want to hear about it because he's been talking about it for about 2 weeks, and I want to hear what this PowerPoint he's been talking about for about 2 weeks. I know it's going to be powerful on the Galilee. I done talked about the Galilee maybe twice, smaller portions in two of my presentations. I think I talked about the Galilee rap. I talked about the Galilee Festival a little bit in my masquerade presentations, but he's gonna go more into depth in that. So stay tuned to my brother tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please subscribe, and help us out. Um, on that note, I want to say Shemim Hotep. Shemim Hotep just means depart in peace. I said ETM Hotep in the beginning, which means come in peace. So now I want to say depart in peace. I also want to say dua abet, which means thank you, family. I appreciate y'all. Y'all could have been doing anything. Modupe. Modupe also means thank you, or Modupe eBay, thank you, family. So Modupe eBay, Moriwi, and again, I want to say Egungun Kiki, Egungun, because I can't do anything without the ancestors. So I always want to pay homage and respect to the ancestors. So Egun Majube Iba E. Um, and we out of here, man. And stay tuned for tomorrow for Shinshan presentation. I'm on here by myself today. I usually have my sidekick. I don't know where he at today. He left me by my lonesome, but it's all good. But I'll be there tomorrow uh, to support him on his presentation. And I may come back Monday with a reloaded video of the African drums is a way of life and a heartbeat of the community. It's a small presentation and kind of make it kind of fun on the Mossi Warrior Can like page. If you hadn't looked at my um, the African Dance Reloaded presentation that was on the Mossi Warrior Can like page. Go back and look at that. You'll learn a lot on that presentation because I made it an educational and a fun presentation. One too serious. It was about fun and learning. I may do this reloaded drum presentation like this on Monday. I may do it, I may not. But thank y'all. We out of here. I'm out of here.
He called for the unity and the redemption of the African world. Salute them honorable Mardi Gras. We are not ready to listen then. They might not have been ready then. There's wonder whether we are ready. Ain't no doubt about it. To listen. We ready, baby. Nah. Let's go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Black kiss in the sky, waving side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. All the G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. Hold it high. Let it fly. Rebel colors forever, Bobby would never die. On the 90, the throne ready, let's take a ride. Cash won't beat me and don't choose a side. This is the plan for the warriors. Solo travel yet still vainglorious. Yeah. Black power represents us. You either rolling with Africa or against us. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. Black fists in the sky, waving side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. All the G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. The red is for the blood. I got the best stock, the rest got blood. The black is for the God, melanated and elevated, holding the main charge. The green is for the cradle. Africa, everything first, the earth stable. This excellency, put it together as a symbol of liberation. That's how we get the letters RBG. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. Black fists in the sky, waving side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high, flag fly high, flag fly high. All the G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. This blind mind 699. People army of no time. I was grab on my design. We roll ready. Hard line. Ain't no game for that red flame. Trip stage for that black bang. Revolution in my veins. Till we free, I won't change. And you can count on that like an advocate. Celebrate the victories and the challenges. This deeper than social media statuses. This lifestyle, motivation building practices. Yeah. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Black fists in the sky, waving side to side. It's the flag fly high. Come on. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. Flag fly high. All the G's on the rise, all eyes will recognize the flag fly high. Red, 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 black, 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 green, green, green. RBG about that red, 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 black, 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 green, green, green. That RBG about that red, 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 that black, 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 that green, green, green. RBG about that red, 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 black, 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 green, green, green. That RBG, baby. RBG, baby. Come on.
Mossi Warrior clan flag still flying high.